Darius Wells was 38 years old when his wife laughed at his father's funeral. Not a polite chuckle, a genuine shoulder-shaking laugh that echoed through the church basement while her family mocked the cheap casket and his father's pathetic life. For 12 years, he'd endured their contempt. The charity case, who married above his station. The teacher, with his sad little salary. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the old man they were ridiculing had been watching from the shadows for 15 years, building something extraordinary, and he'd left every single dollar of it to the son they dismissed as weak. Standing there, listening to his wife's laughter mix with her father's cruel toast about men who leave nothing behind, Darius made a decision. Not out of anger, though rage burned in his chest, but because he'd just learned something that would destroy them all. And it started with a manila folder the lawyer had quietly slid across his desk that morning. A folder containing secrets that would turn his wife's laughter into screams. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Darius sat at the kitchen table, red pen in hand, working through a stack of sophomore history essays about the Civil War. The familiar routine usually brought him peace, finding those moments when students made unexpected connections or showed real understanding. But tonight, his attention kept drifting to Vanessa's clicking heels on the hardwood floor upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing, hangers sliding across the closet rod, and the occasional frustrated sigh filtered down. She was getting ready for another networking event, the third this week. The frequency of these gatherings had increased over the past year, along with her distraction and distance. He circled a spelling error, then paused to write an encouraging note in the margin of Jenny Martinez's paper. The girl had struggled all semester, but was finally starting to grasp historical analysis. Small victories like this reminded him why he loved teaching, despite his father's disappointment in his career choice. "Have you seen my silver bracelet?" Vanessa called down, her voice carrying a sharp edge of irritation. "The Cartier one. Check your jewelry box on the dresser," Darius replied, though he knew she already had. "Or maybe in your car." "Never mind, found it," she snapped, though he hadn't heard her look anywhere new. He returned to grading, but his red pen hovered motionless over the page as his mind wandered to the changes in their marriage. The way Vanessa's phone was always face down now, how she angled her body away when texting, the mechanical pecks on the cheek that had replaced genuine affection. The constant stream of evening obligations that kept her out later and later. Heels clicked on the stairs, and Vanessa appeared in a black cocktail dress that seemed more suited for a date than a professional event. Her makeup was flawless, her dark hair expertly styled. She looked beautiful, but somehow untouchable, like a museum piece behind glass. "How do I look?" she asked, though her attention was already on her phone, thumbs tapping rapidly. "Beautiful," Darius said softly. "Which brokerage is hosting tonight?" "Oh, it's a mixed industry thing. Lots of potential clients." She didn't look up from her screen, a small smile playing at her lips as she read something. "Will your sister be there?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. "Keisha?" "No, she's busy tonight." Vanessa's phone buzzed again. She turned slightly away as she responded to the message. Darius watched her, feeling the familiar ache of something slipping away. He thought about saying something, asking directly about the distance between them, the secrets, the way her family's disdain had evolved from subtle jabs to open mockery of his profession and income. Instead, he said, "Drive safely. Text me when you're heading home." Vanessa grabbed her purse and car keys. "Don't wait up. These things can run late." She crossed to him, dropping a quick kiss somewhere near his cheek, her perfume lingering in the air as she withdrew. Her lips barely made contact, the gesture as empty as a handshake between strangers. The front door closed behind her, and Darius sat in the growing darkness of the kitchen. Her car started in the driveway, the engine's purr fading into the distance. He tried to return to grading, but found himself staring at the same sentence repeatedly, the words blurring together. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. An unfamiliar number with a Cleveland area code. He almost let it go to voicemail, but answered on the last ring. "Hello? Is this Darius Wells?" A deep, professional voice. "Yes, this is he." "Mr. Wells, I'm Theodore Jameson. I'm your father's attorney. I'm very sorry to inform you that James Wells passed away this evening." The words hit like a physical blow. Darius gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "What? What happened?" "Heart attack. It was quick. The doctors said he didn't suffer." Darius sat in silence, his mind racing through 15 years of unspoken words, of pride and stubbornness on both sides. Their last conversation, an argument about his choice to teach, played in his memory with painful clarity. All that time wasted, all those chances for reconciliation, now forever lost. "Mr. Wells? Are you there?" "Yes," Darius managed. "Yes, I'm here. Thank you for letting me know." After arranging to meet the next day about funeral arrangements, Darius hung up. The kitchen felt vast and empty around him, the stack of ungraded papers forgotten. He sat in the dark, remembering his father's face, the disappointment in his eyes when Darius announced his career choice. Now he would never know if that disappointment had softened with time, if understanding or acceptance might have eventually bridged the gap between them. Outside, a neighbor's motion sensor light clicked on, briefly illuminating the kitchen through the window before fading back to darkness. Darius remained at the table, surrounded by the weight of 15 years of silence that could never be broken. The morning sun cast long shadows across the church steps as Darius stood outside the modest brick building, adjusting his tie nervously. His father's wishes had been specific. Simple blessings, Methodist church, no frills, basic service. The small parking lot held only a handful of cars, including the Monroe family's gleaming luxury vehicles that seemed out of place against the humble backdrop. "This is so embarrassing," Vanessa had hissed that morning as they drove to the church. "We could have at least done this at Sacred Heart. They have proper facilities." Now she stood a few feet away from him, designer heels clicking impatiently on the concrete, her attention fixed on her phone. She hadn't touched him once since they'd arrived. Patricia and Richard Monroe emerged from their Mercedes, faces pinched with barely concealed disdain. Patricia's elegant black dress and pearls seemed to mock the setting. Devin and Keisha followed, both smirking as they looked at the church's peeling paint and weathered sign. "Well, this is quaint," Patricia announced, fanning herself with a leather designer clutch. "Though I suppose it suits the circumstances." Richard didn't even attempt to whisper as he commented, "Good Lord, I've seen storage sheds with more dignity." A few other attendees filtered in. 2 elderly neighbors from his father's apartment building, a maintenance worker who had known James for years, and a distinguished-looking black man in an impeccably tailored suit who nodded solemnly to Darius before taking a seat in the back row. Theodore Jameson, his father's attorney, cut a sharp contrast to the humble surroundings. Inside, the simple wooden pews creaked under the minimal weight of the sparse gathering. The basic casket sat at the front, adorned with a single spray of white lilies, all Darius could afford on his teacher's salary. He'd refused Vanessa's offer to upgrade to something more suitable. His father's wishes mattered more than appearances. Throughout the minister's service, the Monroe family created a constant undercurrent of disrespect. Richard's loud whispers carried clearly, "Is that casket made of plywood?" Patricia's dramatic sighs punctuated every prayer. Devin and Keisha huddled together in their pew, phones out, occasionally suppressing giggles as they took photos, presumably to mock later. Vanessa didn't even pretend to pay attention. Her perfectly manicured fingers danced across her phone screen, her red-painted lips curving into small smiles at whatever messages she was receiving. When Darius rose to deliver a brief eulogy about his father's quiet dignity and work ethic, she didn't look up once. The reception in the church basement was somehow worse. Folding tables covered in plain white cloths held simple refreshments, coffee, cookies, and sandwich platters. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the cinder-block walls. "This is beyond pathetic," Devon stage whispered to Keisha, who nodded while snapping more photos of the modest spread. Richard Monroe cleared his throat and raised his styrofoam coffee cup, his voice carrying through the small space with deliberate volume. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, swaying slightly. He'd been nipping from a flask throughout the service. "To James Wells, who taught us all an important lesson. You can live your whole life and leave nothing behind but a rental apartment and a disappointed son." The laughter that followed felt like physical blows. Patricia's tinkling society laugh, Devon's sharp bark, Keisha's mean-spirited giggle. But it was Vanessa's laugh that cut deepest, loud, genuine, her head thrown back in real amusement at his humiliation. She caught his eye across the room and didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Darius stood rooted to the spot, coffee cup trembling in his hand, as their laughter echoed off the basement walls. His father's simple casket was just visible through the basement doorway, and he felt a fresh wave of shame, not for the modest service, but for allowing these people to mock a man they'd never understood. Through the haze of humiliation, he barely registered Theodore Jameson's approach until the lawyer stood beside him. Without acknowledging the still chuckling Monroe family, Jameson pressed a business card into Darius's hand. "Mr. Wells," he said quietly, his deep voice carrying authority despite its low volume. "We need to meet. Friday, 10 a.m. It's about your father's estate." Darius stood in the gleaming lobby of One Cleveland Center, staring up at the electronic directory. Jameson and Associates occupied the entire 42nd floor. The polished marble and brass surroundings felt worlds away from his high school classroom. "Can you believe this place?" Vanessa's father, Richard, sneered, adjusting his tie. "Your dad's lawyer must have other clients to afford this address." Darius hadn't invited his in-laws, but they'd shown up at his house that morning, piling into their Mercedes SUV before he could object. Now they crowded the elevator with him, Richard, Patricia, Devon, and Keisha, while Vanessa checked her makeup in her compact mirror. "Maybe he left you his maintenance uniform," Devon snickered. "You could start a new career." The elevator doors opened to a reception area with panoramic views of Lake Erie. A silver-haired secretary led them down a hallway lined with original artwork to massive wooden doors. Inside, Theodore Jameson's corner office featured floor-to-ceiling windows, leather chairs, and walls of law books behind glass. Jameson stood as they entered, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, his presence commanding. He nodded to Darius but didn't smile. "Please, be seated," he said, gesturing to the chairs arranged before his desk. The Monroe family jostled for position, leaving Darius and Vanessa to take the two center seats. Patricia wrinkled her nose at a crystal water pitcher on a side table, as if even the refreshments offended her sensibilities. "Before we begin," Jameson said, removing a thick file from his desk drawer, "I want to express my personal condolences, Mr. Wells. Your father was not just a client, but a friend of 20 years. "Thank you," Darius said quietly. "Let's get to the numbers," Richard interrupted, leaning forward. "We're all busy people." Jameson's expression remained neutral, but his dark eyes flickered with something that might have been disgust. He opened the file and cleared his throat. "I, James Albert Wells, being of sound mind and body, do hereby distribute my estate as follows." The next words froze everyone in place. "To my son, Darius James Wells, I leave my controlling interest in Wells Property Holdings, LLC, a commercial real estate corporation operating in 12 states, currently valued at $847 million. Patricia's fan clattered to the floor. Devon's mouth fell open. Additionally, Jameson continued, his voice steady, I leave to my son my complete investment portfolio, including diversified stock holdings, municipal bonds, and venture capital investments totaling $213 million. Vanessa's hand shot out to grip Darius's arm, her manicured nails digging into his skin. Her phone sat forgotten in her lap. Furthermore, I leave all personal accounts, including checking, savings, and money market holdings, in the amount of $67 million. Richard made a choking sound. Total estate value, $1,127 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the traffic noise 42 stories below seemed muted, as if the world itself had paused in shock. This is impossible, Richard finally sputtered. He lived in a rental apartment. He worked maintenance. Mr. Wells owned the building where he lived, Jameson replied, along with 67 other commercial properties across the Midwest. The rental apartment was actually the penthouse. He simply chose to live modestly. Jameson extracted a sealed envelope from the file. Your father left you a personal letter, Darius. Would you like me to read it? Darius nodded, still unable to speak. My dear son, Jameson began, his voice softening. If you're reading this, I've failed to find the courage to tell you these things in person. I lived simply not from necessity, but from choice, believing that wealth without discipline corrupts the soul. Our estrangement has been my greatest regret. The day you told me you wanted to teach rather than join my business, I reacted with anger born of fear. Fear that you were rejecting everything I'd built. I was wrong. You chose principle over profit, integrity over wealth. While I hid behind my work, you dedicated yourself to changing young lives. I've watched you from afar all these years, seen your dedication to your students, your quiet strength in the face of disrespect. You are the man I should have been. This wealth is yours because you never sought it. I trust you to use it wisely. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to reconcile. I hope this final gift speaks what I could not. Darius felt tears on his cheeks, but didn't move to wipe them away. Beside him, Vanessa's grip had become almost painful. The Monroe family sat in horrified silence, their earlier mockery hanging in the air like a bad smell. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, their expressions transformed. Darius sat in his parked Honda Civic, the engine off, staring at the manila folder on the passenger seat. The grocery store's fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow across the parking lot, empty except for a few scattered cars. His phone had been buzzing non-stop since they'd left Jameson's office. Texts from Vanessa's family suddenly wanting to catch up and discuss opportunities. He'd told Vanessa he needed to pick up some things for dinner. She hadn't argued, too busy making phone calls to share the wonderful news. Now, in the artificial quiet of his car, Darius reached for the folder with hands that didn't shake. The first photograph showed Vanessa entering the Renaissance Hotel downtown, dressed in the red cocktail dress she'd worn to a client appreciation event. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. The next photo caught her leaving at 6:23 p.m., her hair slightly mussed, holding hands with a tall man in an expensive suit. More photos followed. Vanessa and the man, identified as Blake Henderson in the investigator's notes, at restaurants, at another hotel, kissing in his Mercedes in various parking lots. Blake Henderson, the file revealed, was a luxury car salesman at Cleveland Motor Cars. He had a history of targeting wealthy women, building relationships, and disappearing with their money. Bank statements showed a pattern. Every time Darius's teacher's salary hit their joint account, portions would disappear in cash withdrawals or transfers to an account he didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $1,000 there, growing bolder over time. The total made him sick. $180,000 over 18 months. Their entire emergency fund gone. Home equity loan documents revealed more betrayal. Vanessa had used her access as joint owner to take out a $75,000 line of credit against their house. The money had funded Blake's lifestyle: designer clothes, expensive watches, weekend trips to Chicago, all while Darius drove his 10-year-old Civic and bought his suits at Men's Warehouse. Text messages between Vanessa and her family revealed the depth of their contempt. Devin had written, "Blake is perfect for you. So much better than the teacher. Dad says we'll help with lawyer fees when you file." Keisha chimed in, "Plus, Blake actually knows how to dress. No more embarrassing family photos." Their plan had been calculated. They would wait until after James died, assuming Darius would be emotionally vulnerable. Devin had already consulted divorce attorneys about how to maximize Vanessa's settlement. They'd even researched ways to contest any inheritance from the janitor father, assuming it would be modest enough to challenge. The final pages were the worst. Text messages from the funeral, time-stamped during the service. "Vanessa, this is so embarrassing. Couldn't his dad even afford a decent casket?" "Blake, just smile and nod, baby. Almost over." "Vanessa, he actually cried. So pathetic. Can't wait to be done with this loser." "Blake, just a few more months, baby. Then you're mine, and we're paid." More messages followed. Vanessa describing their marriage as a smart investment in someone who would never leave her, never challenge her. Blake promising exotic vacations with the settlement money. The Monroe family strategizing how to manipulate Darius's grief into financial decisions that would benefit them. The final photo showed Vanessa and Blake celebrating at Giovanni's, an upscale restaurant, the night after James died. The investigator's note read, "Subject ordered champagne. Toasted to new beginnings." Darius closed the folder slowly, deliberately. The rage inside him wasn't hot. It was cold, crystalline, clarifying. 12 years of marriage reduced to calculation. His grief weaponized against him. His devotion turned into a punchline. He started the car and pulled up his phone's browser. The Ritz-Carlton downtown had availability. He booked a suite under James Wells, his father's name feeling like armor now. The same father who had seen through Vanessa's facade and arranged this final protection from beyond the grave. As he drove toward the hotel, Darius felt something shift inside him. The humble teacher they'd mocked was gone. In his place sat his father's son, controlled, strategic, and now armed with both truth and resources. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa. "Coming home soon? We should celebrate." Darius didn't reply. He handed his keys to the Ritz's valet and walked into the marble lobby, the manila folder tucked securely under his arm. Behind him, his modest Honda looked out of place among the luxury vehicles. Soon, none of that would matter. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ritz-Carlton's business center. Darius sat across from Theodore Jameson at a mahogany conference table, his father's folder open between them. The room's silence felt heavy, broken only by the soft hum of air conditioning and the occasional click of Jameson's Mont Blanc pen. "What are my options?" Darius asked, his voice steady. The rage from last night had crystallized into something colder, more focused. Jameson studied him for a moment. "Your father anticipated something like this. He left very specific instructions." He opened his briefcase and removed several documents. "First, we need to protect the inheritance. Ohio's community property laws." "She gets half of everything we earned during the marriage," Darius interrupted. "But the inheritance can be protected if we act quickly." Jameson spread the papers across the table. "I've already contacted our financial team. We can set up a series of trusts, ironclad ones. The kind that would take an army of lawyers years to even attempt challenging. Do it. Jameson made a call. Within an hour, 2 financial advisors joined them, bringing laptops and stacks of documents. They worked methodically, transferring the entire inheritance into protected accounts and trusts. By noon, Darius had signed enough papers to make his hand cramp. Next, Jameson said, we file for legal separation. Today. It establishes a clear date after which any inherited assets are solely yours. My associate is preparing the paperwork now. How long until it's filed? By end of business day. Judge Thompson owes me a favor. He'll sign it immediately. Darius nodded. And the investigator? Martin Drake. The best in Cleveland. Your father trusted him completely. Jameson pulled out a business card. He's already updating his files. The preliminary report suggests there's much more to uncover about Mr. Henderson and the Monroe family's financial situation. I want everything, every detail, every connection, every penny they've stolen or hidden. Drake works fast. Give him a week. Jameson paused. What's your plan for handling Vanessa and her family in the meantime? I'll give them exactly what they expect, Darius said. The passive, grateful teacher, overwhelmed by his good fortune. They think I'm weak. Let them keep thinking that. By late afternoon, everything was in motion. The inheritance was secured in untouchable trusts. The legal separation papers were filed and signed. Drake's investigation was expanding. Darius had even opened new personal accounts at a different bank, accounts Vanessa couldn't access. He drove home as sunset painted Cleveland's skyline orange. 3 text messages waited on his phone. Richard Monroe. Son, let's grab lunch next week. So many opportunities to discuss. Patricia Monroe. Darling, we must have you and Vanessa over for dinner soon. Devin Monroe. Hey, bro, got some great investment tips when you're ready. Darius responded to each with warm appreciation and vague promises to connect soon. He pulled into their driveway, noting Vanessa's BMW parked at an angle. She never could park straight, always in too much of a hurry. Inside, Vanessa practically bounced toward him, wearing the silk robe he'd given her last Christmas. There you are. I was worried. She wrapped her arms around him. Have you been driving around all this time? Thinking about everything? Just needed to process, he said, returning her hug mechanically. It's a lot to take in. Of course, baby. She kissed his neck. Everyone's been calling. They're all so excited for us. Us, Darius thought. Always us when there's money involved. I think I need a few days, he said carefully. Maybe stay at a hotel, just to clear my head and plan our next steps. Whatever you need. Her hand slid down his chest. But tonight, let me help you relax. Later, in bed, Darius watched her perform her version of passion. The practiced moans, the calculated touches, the theatrical finale. He responded just enough to maintain the illusion, all while noting how her phone kept lighting up on the nightstand, Blake's messages coming in steadily. The next morning, he packed a small bag while Vanessa made coffee. Just for a few days, he assured her. I need space to think about what to do with all this money. Make sure we make the right decisions. Of course, honey. She kissed him goodbye, already reaching for her phone. Take all the time you need. Back in his hotel suite, Darius looked out over the city his father had quietly built an empire in. He took out his phone and called the number on Drake's card. The investigator answered on the first ring. Mr. Drake, Darius said, I want to know everything. Martin Drake spread photographs and documents across the hotel suite's coffee table with methodical precision. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across images of betrayal. Surveillance photos, bank statements, text message transcripts. Darius sat in a leather armchair, his posture relaxed despite the tension in his jaw. Let's start with Blake Henderson, Drake said, his voice gravelly from decades of cigarettes. He placed a marriage certificate on top. Married to Jennifer Henderson, née Taylor, for 12 years. 2 children, Emma, age 10, and Marcus, age 8. They live in Cincinnati. Darius picked up a family photo. Blake Henderson stood grinning between a pretty blonde woman and 2 smiling children. The perfect suburban father. Does his wife know? No. Jennifer teaches 3rd grade, volunteers at her church, thinks her husband travels for work selling luxury cars. Drake's lip curled. He does sell cars when he's not running cons on wealthy women. We found 3 similar schemes in the past 5 years. He picks targets carefully, usually through country clubs or charity events, gets close, starts an affair, encourages them to divorce their husbands, promises a future together. Once they're divorced and he has access to their settlement money, he disappears. And Vanessa was next. With a twist, Drake shuffled through papers. Your inheritance made you a much bigger target. We found texts between Blake and Vanessa from the day after the will reading. They're already planning how to challenge it if necessary. Darius's expression remained neutral as he read the messages. Blake, baby, we're talking billions. Play it smart. Vanessa, don't worry. He's so grateful I'm still here. He'll give me whatever I want. Drake moved on to financial records. The Monroe family empire is built on sand. Richard's company, Monroe Enterprises, has been hemorrhaging money for years. They owe $3.2 million to various creditors, all coming due within months. The only thing keeping them afloat is Richard's talent for getting extensions. He laid out loan documents, collection notices, bounced checks. They were planning to ask you to invest $10 million in the business. We found emails between Richard and Devon discussing how to approach you, play up family loyalty, emphasize the opportunity to prove yourself worthy of their respect. And Keisha's role? Drake pulled up text messages on his tablet. She's been Blake's inside source for 18 months, feeding him information about your schedule, your habits, your vulnerabilities. She gets regular payments from him, usually $500 a week, plus promises of a bigger cut once they close the deal. The investigator hesitated before placing the final stack of papers on the table. The marriage was never real, Mr. Wells. We found Vanessa's messages to her friend Caroline from right after she met you at that alumni event. Darius read silently, "Met the perfect mark tonight. History teacher, totally boring but stable. Educated enough not to embarrass me, humble enough to never challenge me, devoted enough to never leave. Mom says I need to lock down someone reliable before my looks fade. This one's perfect. He practically radiates doormat energy." More messages followed, spanning their entire relationship. Vanessa complaining about his teaching salary, mocking his clothes, his car, his gentle nature. Her joy at finding designer labels she could buy with their home equity line of credit. Her contempt for his grief when his father died. The latest message to Blake twisted the knife. "I married a doormat. I just didn't know his father was secretly rich." Lucky break. Drake gathered the documents quietly. There's more detail in the full report. Bank records showing exactly how much they stole, transcripts of every conversation we recorded, complete profiles of everyone involved. But that's the essence of it. Darius stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. His reflection showed no pain, no rage, just calm consideration. "Thank you, Mr. Drake. Excellent work. What's your next move?" Exactly what they expect. Darius turned, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I'm going home tonight with takeout from Vanessa's favorite Thai place. I'll tell her I've made a decision, that I want to invest in family. $10 million into Monroe Enterprises. Suggest a family dinner next week to discuss details." Drake raised an eyebrow. "Playing into their hands?" "For now." Darius gathered his keys and wallet. "They think they're winning. Let them keep thinking that." That evening, Darius walked through his front door carrying fragrant bags of pad thai and green curry. Vanessa looked up from her phone, surprise flickering across her perfect features. "I've been thinking," he said, setting the food on their kitchen counter. About family, about the future. She moved closer, her eyes calculating behind her smile. I want to invest in family, Darius continued. I'm thinking 10 million into your father's business. Let's have dinner with everyone next week to discuss details. Vanessa's face lit up with triumph, poorly disguised as joy. She pressed herself against him, kissing him passionately. A performance worthy of an Oscar. Over the next 6 days, Darius orchestrated his response with the same quiet precision that had defined his teaching career. Each move was calculated, each piece positioned with careful intent. Monday morning found him in the offices of Cleveland's largest commercial lending firm. The loan officer's eyes widened as Darius laid out his proposal. He would purchase all of Monroe Enterprises' outstanding debt at full value. By afternoon, 3 more banks had agreed to sell their Monroe-held notes. Darius now owned every dollar of the family's $3.2 million debt obligation. Tuesday brought him to a sunny elementary school playground in Cincinnati. Jennifer Henderson supervised recess, her bright smile masking no knowledge of her husband's betrayal. When Darius approached, introducing himself gently, her world tilted on its axis. In the school's empty teacher's lounge, he showed her everything. The affair, the manipulation, the planned con. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, hands trembling over photos of Blake with Vanessa. "All those business trips." I believed him. "None of this is your fault," Darius assured her. "But I need your help making sure he faces consequences." Jennifer straightened her shoulders. "Teacher strong. Tell me what you need." Wednesday filled a conference room with forensic accountants, their laptops displaying spreadsheets tracking 18 months of systematic theft. Every dollar Vanessa had stolen was documented. $180,000 drained from joint accounts through careful withdrawals and hidden transfers. The home equity line she'd maxed out funding Blake's lifestyle. Credit cards opened in their joint names, but used only for her expenses. "The pattern is clear," the lead accountant explained, highlighting transactions. She began small, testing limits, then grew bolder when she met no resistance. Classic financial infidelity escalation. Thursday evening, Drake's surveillance team captured what would become crucial footage. In a private booth at Cleveland's most expensive steakhouse, Blake raised his wine glass to Vanessa. "To my future wife and our future fortune," he declared, crystal clinking. "That idiot teacher has no idea." Vanessa's laugh echoed through the hidden microphone. "He's arranging the investment dinner for Monday. 10 million into Daddy's company. Just the beginning. Once we're married, we'll have access to everything," Blake promised. "These billionaires never see it coming." Friday afternoon, Darius met Marcus Haynes, his father's closest business associate, in James's old office. The space remained untouched. Simple furniture, organized files, a life of deliberate modesty. "Your father was planning to reach out," Marcus revealed, pulling out a letter James had drafted but never sent. "He watched you teach, you know. Sat in the back of school events, kept newspaper clippings about your students' achievements. He was so proud, but couldn't find the words to bridge the gap." Darius read his father's unfinished letter, throat tight. "Son, I was wrong. You chose the better path." Saturday brought the final devastating revelation. Drake arrived at the hotel suite with recordings of Vanessa and Blake meeting Devon at a coffee shop, discussing strategies to challenge the will. "Undue influence is our best angle," Devon explained, legal papers spread between coffee cups. "We argue James wasn't of sound mind, that someone manipulated him into disinheriting family. With the right judge, we can force a settlement." "How much could we get?" Blake asked. "Half at least. Hundreds of millions." Devon smirked. The idiot's too naive to fight back properly. Text messages between Vanessa and Blake later that night laid out their plan. Challenge the will. Drain Darius financially through legal fees. Force him to settle to make it stop. Take everything. Sunday, Darius finalized arrangements for Monday's investment dinner at La Maison. Cleveland's finest restaurant. The private dining room would seat 20. The guest list was precise. The entire Monroe family: Blake Henderson, Jennifer, Theodore Jameson, Martin Drake, both forensic accountants, and the bank officers holding documentation of Richard's loans. Monday at 5 p.m., Darius stood in Jameson's office, reviewing final details. The evidence was organized, the projector tested, security positioned. "Everyone confirmed?" Darius asked quietly. "Blake, Jennifer, the investigators, the accountants." Jameson nodded, his expression grim but satisfied. "The trap is set." Monday evening descended on La Maison like a velvet curtain, the restaurant's elegant lighting casting a warm glow through the private dining room's frosted glass doors. At precisely 7 p.m., the Monroe family swept in like royalty returning to court. Richard wore his finest suit, Patricia draped in designer silk, Devon and Keisha dressed as though attending a coronation. Vanessa entered last, stunning in a red dress that cost more than a month of Darius's teaching salary. Her smile was radiant, practiced, perfect, the same smile she'd worn when targeting him at that alumni event 12 years ago. She slipped her arm through his, playing the adoring wife with Oscar-worthy precision. "Honey, this is exactly what our family needed," she cooed, squeezing his arm. "A fresh start for all of us." The private dining room gleamed with crystal and silver, white lilies adorning the long mahogany table. Darius had arranged the seating carefully. The Monroe family clustered at one end, empty chairs between them and the door. Security personnel, dressed as waitstaff, positioned themselves discreetly by both exits. Champagne flowed freely as appetizers arrived. Richard dominated the conversation, outlining grand plans for Monroe Enterprises once Darius's investment arrived. "$10 million is just the beginning," he declared, raising his glass. "With your father's fortune backing us, we'll build an empire." Patricia was already redecorating their home in her mind. The foyer simply must be redone in Italian marble. And that dreary living room furniture, she patted Darius's hand. "We'll help you develop proper taste, dear." Devon and Keisha competed to shower Darius with compliments, their previous contempt buried under avalanches of false praise. "You were always the smartest one in the family," Devon insisted, the same man who'd called him the charity case at the funeral. "Remember how I always stood up for you?" Keisha lied smoothly, conveniently forgetting 12 years of mockery. Vanessa played her part flawlessly, laughing at Darius's mildest comments, touching his arm, calling him darling, a term she hadn't used since their first year of marriage. She kept her phone face down beside her plate, but Darius noticed her glancing at it whenever it buzzed. After the appetizers were cleared, Darius stood slowly. The room quieted, expecting the investment announcement they'd been salivating over. He looked at each face around the table, the greed poorly hidden beneath their smiles, the calculation behind their flattery. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began quietly. "These past 2 weeks have been educational. I've learned so much about family, about loyalty." His eyes met Vanessa's. "About who people really are." He nodded to Theodore Jameson, positioned by the light switch. The room dimmed. Behind Darius, a projection screen descended silently from the ceiling. "Before we discuss any investments," Darius continued, his voice steady, "I'd like to share some memories with you. Some footage that really captures who we all are." The first image filled the screen. Vanessa and Blake tangled in hotel sheets, the timestamp clear. 3 months ago at the Ritz-Carlton. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Patricia's gasp cut through the sudden silence. Richard surged to his feet, face purple. "How dare you?" Richard began. But Darius didn't stop. The images continued relentlessly. Bank statements showing systematic theft from joint accounts. Text messages where Vanessa mocked him at his father's funeral. Screenshots of emails between Devon and estate lawyers, plotting to contest the will. Messages between Keisha and Blake discussing their finder's fee for facilitating the affair. "This is outrageous," Devon sputtered, half rising. A security guard's hand on his shoulder firmly returned him to his seat. The evidence mounted. Documentation of Richard's hidden debts, Patricia's social media messages encouraging the affair, recorded conversations planning to exploit the inheritance. Every betrayal, every calculation, every mockery exposed in high definition. The final image appeared. Blake's wedding photo with Jennifer, his actual wife, and their 2 children, taken just last Christmas. Vanessa stared at the photo, her perfect mask cracking. That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," Darius said calmly. He turned toward the door and gestured. "Come in, Jennifer." Blake's actual wife entered the dining room, elegant in her simple blue dress, her expression a mixture of pain and determination. Vanessa leaped up, knocking over her champagne glass. She looked wildly for an escape, but security blocked both exits. The trap had sprung perfectly. Chaos erupted in the private dining room. Chairs scraped against hardwood as the Monroe family scrambled to their feet. Richard lunged for the main exit, while Patricia clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Devon and Keisha darted toward the service door, only to find their paths blocked by Darius's security team. "Sit down." Darius's voice cut through the pandemonium, quiet but sharp as a blade. "You're going to listen. All of you." The security guards firmly guided everyone back to their seats. Vanessa remained frozen, staring at the wedding photo still projected on the screen, her perfect mask completely shattered. "For 12 years, Darius began, his calm tone somehow more devastating than anger, "I accepted your contempt, your mockery, your jokes about my salary, my career, my worth as a human being. I thought if I just worked harder, proved myself more, somehow I'd earn your respect." He shook his head. "I was wrong. Nothing would ever be enough, because you're incapable of respecting anyone who doesn't serve your greed." He turned to Richard and Patricia, who sat rigid in their chairs. "You raised your daughter to be a parasite. You taught her that people are nothing but resources to exploit. Well, here's your lesson in consequences. I've acquired every loan, every debt, every financial obligation your family carries. All $3.2 million of it." Richard's face went from purple to ash gray. "I'm calling it all due in 30 days. Every penny." Patricia's hand fluttered to her throat. "You can't." "I can. I did." Darius cut her off. "Your country club membership, your social standing, your carefully maintained facade of wealth, it's all over." He shifted his focus to Devon and Keisha, who seemed to shrink in their seats. "You actively participated in this conspiracy, fed information to Blake, coordinated the affair, researched ways to steal my inheritance. I've sent comprehensive evidence of your involvement to your employers, your social circles, every person whose opinion you value. Your reputations are finished." Devon tried to bluster. "You have no proof." "I have every text, every email, every recorded conversation." Darius's voice remained steady. "Including your consultation with estate lawyers about undue influence claims. The Bar Association will be especially interested in that ethical violation." He turned to Blake, who sat sweating in his expensive suit. "You're a con man who abandoned his wife and children to chase other women's money. Jennifer has already filed fraud charges. The police have everything: the fake investment schemes, the stolen funds, the bigamy. You're getting nothing but legal bills and felony charges." Blake started to speak, but Jennifer's quiet voice stopped him. "Don't bother lying, Blake. It's over." Finally, Darius faced Vanessa. She tried to meet his gaze but couldn't hold it. "You married me because you thought I was easy to control," he said softly. "You chose me at that alumni event because I was safe, educated enough not to embarrass you, humble enough not to challenge you, devoted enough to never leave. You laughed at my father's funeral. You stole from me systematically for 18 months. You lied to my face every day, while mocking me behind my back. His voice caught slightly. The only thing you were right about is that I loved you. That's what makes this unforgivable. Vanessa's tears started to fall, but Darius had seen too many of her performances to be moved. He looked at Jennifer, his tone gentling. I've set up a trust fund for your children's education. You didn't deserve what he did to you. The paperwork will arrive tomorrow. Jennifer nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. Darius surveyed the room one final time, taking in their shocked faces, their crumbling worlds. Richard slumped in defeated rage. Patricia dabbed at her running mascara. Devon stared blankly at the table while Keisha quietly sobbed. Blake looked like a cornered animal, and Vanessa, his wife of 12 years, sat perfectly still, her calculated future dissolving around her. He walked toward the exit, his steps measured and calm. At the door, he turned back to face them one last time. You thought I was weak because I was kind, he said quietly. You thought I was stupid because I trusted. You were wrong about everything. He left them in ruins. 2 years passed like a cleansing rain. Darius stood in his father's former penthouse, now transformed into the James Wells Foundation Scholarship Center. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over students hunched at study carrels and gathered around communal tables. Their quiet determination filled the space with purpose. The renovation had preserved his father's essence while creating something new. James's beloved books still lined the mahogany shelves, but now they were accompanied by computers, printers, and study materials. What touched Darius most were the photographs. Dozens of them displayed tastefully throughout the space, documenting moments of his life his father had captured from afar. His high school graduation, his first day teaching, simple snapshots of him grading papers at coffee shops or helping students after class, each one a testament to a father's silent pride. The aftermath of that decisive dinner had unfolded exactly as planned. Justice served with mathematical precision. Vanessa's divorce settlement amounted to exactly $47,000, her legal share of their modest pre-inheritance assets. She'd tried to contest it, of course, but Jameson's ironclad preparation prevailed. The inheritance remained completely protected in trusts she couldn't touch. Blake's arrest for fraud and bigamy made local headlines. Jennifer's lawsuit stripped him of everything, even his prized collection of designer suits. Last Darius heard, he was serving 5 years and would emerge to nothing but debt and disgrace. The Monroe family's carefully constructed world of artificial privilege collapsed completely. Their home was foreclosed, Richard's business dissolved under the weight of called-in loans, and bankruptcy followed swiftly. They now shared a small 2-bedroom apartment in a building they would have sneered at 2 years ago. Their social death was even more complete than their financial ruin. The Monroe name became toxic in Cleveland society, synonymous with greed and betrayal. Devon, stripped of his law firm position after the scandal, now worked document review for 1/3 of his previous salary. His arrogance had curdled into bitter resignation. Keisha's real estate license suspension drove her to relocate to Indiana, where she struggled to rebuild under a cloud of disgrace. And Vanessa, the woman who had shared his bed while plotting his destruction, worked as a receptionist at a dental office, living paycheck to paycheck in a friend's spare room. But Darius found no joy in their suffering. Instead, he channeled his energy into honor and growth. The James Wells Foundation had already provided full scholarships to 37 first-generation college students pursuing teaching careers. Each recipient embodied the values his father had quietly lived by: humility, determination, and genuine desire to serve others. He still taught 2 history classes each week at his old high school, arriving in the same Toyota he'd always driven, wearing the same comfortable clothes, that marked him as an easy target for the Monroe family's contempt. The students never knew he was a billionaire unless they Googled him, and he preferred it that way. Teaching wasn't his job anymore. It was his purpose, his connection to what mattered. Life had softened its edges. He was dating Sarah, a fellow teacher who had known him long before the inheritance, who rolled her eyes at luxury and loved debating historical interpretations over coffee. Their connection felt real in a way his marriage never had, built on shared values rather than calculation. The setting sun painted the study center in orange and gold. Darius watched a young scholarship recipient furiously highlighting a textbook, reminded of his own studying days. His father had been watching then, too, he realized, seeing value where others saw weakness. He gathered his keys and jacket, nodding goodbye to the center's staff. It was time for his weekly visit to the cemetery. The drive was peaceful, Cleveland's early evening traffic thinning as he approached the simple grounds where his father rested. The headstone remained modest despite Darius's billions, a pure reflection of James Wells's values. Darius set fresh flowers against the granite and settled onto the grass, not caring about the dirt on his jeans. "I understand now, Dad," he said quietly to the stone. "You lived simply because you knew what mattered. Material things are just tools. Character is what builds a legacy." He touched the cool granite. "I'm making you proud." His phone buzzed. A notification from the foundation. Another scholarship had been awarded. A young woman from East Cleveland, daughter of immigrants, dreams of teaching elementary school. His heart lifted. Darius smiled, brushing grass and dirt from his well-worn jeans as he stood. He walked to his Toyota, the same reliable car he'd driven for years. He had won this battle not by becoming what the Monroes valued, but by refusing to abandon what truly mattered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.